Welcome to Explosive Enterprises, and over the years we've seen a bunch of comments asking us to do a video on some particular loadout. For me, that's a bit difficult because I'm constantly experimenting with different setups to find what I like, and sometimes picking gear for aesthetic or LARP reasons rather than raw practicality. But even when I'm building a purely practical setup, you may have noticed that we play in a variety of environments and formats, so I felt it was worth exploring the different factors that go into building a kit. On top of that, in the last few years, we've noticed increased discussion of harnessed belt kit, aka webbing, not just among airsofters, but at a professional level too, and a lot of people seem to be confused about why this is becoming a thing again. This is interesting to me on two levels, both because I have long preferred belt kits over plate carriers for airsoft, and because understanding evolving trends in warfighter requirements is part of what I do for a living. So today, instead of talking through a single loadout, I'm going to review the common types of load-bearing equipment and their strengths and weaknesses, then talk through airsoft-specific gear considerations, how the different types of gear can be combined to maximize their strengths, and then how exactly harnessed belt kit fits into all this. Right off the bat, if there's only one thing you take away from this video, it should be the phrase, "mission dictates gear." That's just a pithy way of saying that there's no objective tier list of gear or one setup to rule them all, and instead gear is tailored to meet specific requirements based on equipment, duration, and environment. Sounds obvious, right? Well, the issue is that when you start looking into the modern civilian gear market, most of it is heavily influenced by contemporary trends among special operations forces and flat-range shooters, as well as a hefty dose of tactical fashion. Gear that's popular and meets the needs of actual operators, competitors, or LARPers may not be what best meets your needs for a recreational force-on-force environment. Of course, Airsoft is a fashion show too, as we routinely demonstrate on this channel, and if you're just playing 15-minute pickup games at a local paintball field, then pretty much anything will work and this isn't worth worrying about. But the longer and more physically demanding a game, and the more equipment you need to bring with you into the field, the more important it is to have an appropriate setup to minimize exhaustion, discomfort, risk of injury, equipment damage, and just general suckiness. Being physically fit is even better, but that requires exercise and discipline rather than a credit card, so it's pretty unpopular in the tactical community. Let's get into specifics with different types of load-bearing equipment and their respective strengths and weaknesses. We'll start with the plate carrier, probably the most ubiquitous piece of modern kit, and this specifically is a Ferro Slickster. I should caveat that I don't really like the Slickster. I don't think it's cost-effective as an expandable, do-everything carrier, and if you want to learn more on that, Hoplophile has a couple of great videos that capture my feelings exactly. Regardless, this carries plates, it also holds mags, grenades, a radio, and it illustrates the stable, all-in-one nature of the plate carrier where you could just throw on a single piece of gear and have all your fighting equipment along with body armor in one package. However, for Airsoft, unless you're playing in a milsim that gives them rules, plates are dead weight. Even dummy plates trap moisture and by insulating your core inhibit your ability to shed heat. You can turn this design to your advantage with ice plates as made by Core Performance and their clones, which are essentially ESAP-shaped plastic reservoirs that can be frozen. You get cooling from the ice and can drink it as it melts, or just leave it as a room temperature rigid hydration bladder, and this gives the plate a practical purpose beyond LARP. Either way though, loading up a plate carrier with all your fighting gear shifts your center of mass upwards and forwards, reducing stability, increasing spinal load, and increasing the exertion and physical stress needed to balance that weight across broken ground. You can certainly manage it to a point, but the more weight, the more significant these become, and for those of you who have professional experience doing this, the VA would like to remind you that the pain in your knees and lower back is definitely not service-related. Now, because this is the internet where nuance goes to die, I have to explicitly clarify that I'm not saying plate carriers are bad. Plate carriers are the ideal way to carry gear if you need body armor and need to minimize lateral bulks you can operate around vehicles or in urban environments. That's what they were designed for. But as with any other piece of gear, optimizing for that specific set of requirements involves making trade-offs elsewhere. So if you don't actually need plates, chest rigs are basically just the pouches and suspension of a plate carrier minus the plate. This gets you the same amount of gear or more, but with more flexibility and adjustment, better breathability, and less projection out from the body. It isn't quite as rigid as a plate carrier, of course, but if properly adjusted, the difference is negligible. And where most plate carriers get quite bulky with double stack mags in front of the plate, double stack on a chest rig is pretty comparable to single stack on a plate carrier. Chest rigs range in size from tiny micro rigs up to everything in the kitchen sink Rhodesian recon vest derivatives, and I'll give some thoughts on that later, but for now I'll just say that if you're new to Airsoft and need gear, a chest rig of some sort is a very good place to start. Next up is belts. The modern standard is the two-piece shooter's belt with a Velcro-covered inner belt that goes through the belt loops and a corresponding outer belt that holds all the gear. There are two limitations with this system though. First, because this isn't padded and all the weight rests directly on the hips, there's a sharp limit to how much it can comfortably carry. While I could probably carry everything I need for a 15-minute round on it, I prefer to keep the belt lighter and supplement it with a chest rig or plate carrier. And second, this requires the belt to be exposed, so a shirt needs to be tucked in, and any additional layers like winter wear have to go over top of the belt, which can become annoying. One solution is to use a padded adapter like this HSGI Sure Grip Micro in lieu of the inner belt, and now we've reinvented the battle belt of the 2000s and 2010s. The battle belt is the same basic concept as the two-piece, just using a larger padded surface in lieu of the two-piece Velcro system, and for a while it was pretty common to see a plate carrier paired with a battle belt to offload some of the gear to the belt. That helps to reduce the bulk and top heaviness of the plate carrier, but you're still limited in how much you can put on a belt before weight starts to become a problem. But what if we were to put all the gear on the belt and then add padded straps to stabilize it and redistribute some of that weight to the shoulders? And now we arrive at the harness belt, also called webbing or belt kit, like this old Alice rig. Equipment is arranged from 2 o'clock to 10 o'clock, typically with ammo up front and water in the back, which balances it out. It keeps your chest clear to radiate heat, and since it distributes weight between the hips and shoulders, lets you pack a tremendous amount of weight into your center of mass without shoulder strain or feeling top heavy. And lastly, research demonstrates that placing weight on the hips rather than the torso results in greater kinematic efficiency for load bearing, meaning it takes less energy to move across distance, particularly on uneven ground. There are good reasons why this was the most common pattern of load bearing equipment across the world for the entire 20th century, but as with all the other systems, this has drawbacks. First, the front center of the belt needs to be kept clear to avoid impeding the legs when crouching. That eats into already limited belt circumference, so this style of setup requires bulky double stack, triple stack, or general purpose pouches in order to hold the same amount of gear you could spread all across a plate carrier or chest rig plus belt. This horizontal bulk is a problem for moving through cramped CQB environments or operating in and out of vehicles. And of course, if you need plates, those have to be worn separately. These are all significant concerns for mechanized operations in urban terrain and are why this style of equipment was gradually abandoned in the West in favor of just putting gear on the plate carrier. But anyways, lastly we have the backpack. Not really a military load-bearing system by any means, but an assault pack or just ordinary hiking backpack is an easy way to help extend the carrying capacity of a gear setup. So as building blocks, we have plate carriers, chest rigs, simple belts, harnessed belts, and backpacks, each with respective strengths and weaknesses, capabilities, and limitations. To actually build a kit out of them, the first question is what equipment we need to bring, which is largely a function of game duration. And while there are established methodologies for organizing gear, first line versus second line, and so on, for Airsoft I like to assess equipment chronologically and divide it into 3 categories. Call them now, soon, and later. The now category is things I need on a moment-to-moment basis. That's magazines, grenades, mock tourniquets, and kill rags as applicable, small speed loader, sidearm, magazine retention if not reindexing. This is the basic fighting equipment I need in order to actually play Airsoft comfortably, and I need gear that lets me access all of it quickly. The second category, soon, is what I might need within an hour, which can include water, gas, extra BBs, maybe an electric speed loader, reloading components for grenades, any adjustment tools I need. These are the things I want to have readily on hand for longer games, but won't need in the middle of a fight. And the third category, later, is the gear that I need to keep and play for the rest of the day, stuff that will stay packed until we have some downtime. That might include food, tools and spare parts, night vision, spare batteries, or a backup gun. The reason I make this delineation is because I find it maps cleanly to game length. For those 15-minute CQB matches, I could just bring the first category and leave water and gas at staging. For longer games of 30 minutes up to 2-hour rotations, I'll bring the second category as well. And for up to 24 hours, that's all 3 categories. Multi-day gets into rucking, which I think ought to be a topic for another video, so I'll cut it off here, but this is still a pretty wide range in duration. If all you need is that 15 minutes of gameplay, then you don't need much gear at all. Personally, I always start with a belt, and this is specifically a AWS SMU. This CSM dump pouch can hold my entire combat load, and I find it easier than re-indexing. A sidearm is overkill for most players, and if you're just starting out I wouldn't advise buying one, but I have one so I might as well bring it using a True North modular holster adapter to attach it to the belt. I use an S-Tac Kiwi for a speed reload mag pouch, and a small S-Tac utility pouch for kill rag and tools, and this forms the core of my gear setup, but on its own the lack of rifle magazines limits it to pistol-only rounds, so I usually supplement with a chest rig. Now most chest rigs on the market nowadays are micro rigs, holding usually 3 rifle mags plus some support gear, and again for those 15-minute rounds with a higher capacity of AEG mags this is more than enough, particularly if combined with a belt. But for the sake of scalability with the low capacity of gas mags, I prefer the slightly larger rigs that can accommodate at least 6 mags. This is a Whiskey 2.4 accessory panel, Nixie Works mag pouches showcasing a homebrew Molly-based solution, and you could build something similar with a tactical assault panel and surplus pouches, but sewn rigs like this Pattern 83 chest rig provide better stability. Lately I've been experimenting with an onward recce rig. Oh yeah, recce, no one one knows what it means, but it's provocative and it gets the people going. While I haven't spent enough time with this rig to comment on it as a product, in general I like this form factor. It strikes a good middle ground, able to carry more mags than a micro rig, but without also trying to carry sustainment under the arms, which tends to interfere with equipment on the belt and just adds a lot of weight and bulk. That's relevant when we start looking at the 30 minutes to 2 hours time bracket, and to carry that soon category of equipment, I bring a small backpack. Initially I used a knockoff of a Haley Strategic flat pack, but I've come to really detest the damn thing for its awful strap design and unergonomic expansion, and I'm now considerably happier with a Helicontex Groundhog. This is a small backpack with a 10-liter capacity and much better padding, and the straps are still thin and flat enough to shoulder a rifle without difficulty. It can hold a hydration bladder, but it can also accommodate a canteen or Nalgene bottle on either side, freeing up internal space. For 30-minute games, I can comfortably carry my water, gas, and electric speed loader onto the field in the backpack and ditch it at a spawn point. That reduces my load back down to just what I need in the here and now, with the remainder accessible whenever I go back to respawn. For something like a multi-hour rotation in a Milsim Light, or to carry an HPA bottle, I can just keep the backpack on the entire time. If I'm using a machine gun, then I don't need the chest rig at all, and belt plus backpack will suffice. This combination of belt, medium chest rig, and small backpack is my go-to now for anything up to a couple of hours, and if you're looking for my recommendation for a practical generalist setup, this is it. It scales well, it's modular for accommodating different types of guns, it keeps all the gear readily accessible, and is just comfortable and streamlined to play in. The biggest difference between a 15-minute game, 30-minute game, and 2-hour rotation is simply whether I leave the backpack at staging, leave it at spawn, or keep it on the whole time. At first I was wary of the extra straps, but I've come to find I much prefer this system over integrating a pack directly into a chest rig or plate carrier, which makes it easier to carry, but also considerably more difficult to self-access. Taking off a harnessed belt rig in the field while having comms hooked up to my headwear is annoying enough. Taking off a chest rig or plate carrier in a hurry is just not feasible, and I don't like having to rely on my teammates to access my equipment. There are self-access solutions like the Haley Hitchhike Kit, but then you're stacking straps anyways, and I guess I just don't see the advantage of our wholly separate backpack that I can take off and put back on in seconds without having to fuss with clips. Maybe there's some killer application I'm missing, I don't know, I'm making all this up. Anyways, now to extend this setup for a full day of operations, I could shift up to a larger plate carrier or chest rig, or I could just add more stuff to the backpack. These are both viable solutions, but both involve adding more weight to the upper torso. If I expect to be hiking and want to minimize fatigue, I need to get more weight off the shoulders and onto the hips. This time span, 2 to 12 hours, and this environment, outdoor games on foot, is where I think harnessed belt kit or webbing starts to make a lot of sense. I'm not going to be getting in and out of vehicles or running through kill houses, so bulk of the waistline doesn't really matter. I have to bring enough stuff that a high-speed, low-drag setup is not happening regardless, so I'd rather optimize for stability and comfort, and I'm going to be working as part of a squad, so keeping dirt and mud out of my magazines is more important than minimizing reload times. So, let's look at a couple of harness belt setups. First up is the Alice rig I showed earlier. It's classic, it's cool, it's cheap, it's thoroughly obsolete. I still like the Alice mag pouches, and you can carry a lot of gear with this setup, but the belt is floppy, the Y-harness doesn't stabilize well, clips and hooks are annoying, and there isn't nearly enough padding anywhere in the design. If you really want to make it work, you can improve it further with DIY fixes like zip tying on padding and replacing the metal hardware with paracord, or you can combine it with a compatible vest like this LBV-88, which substantially improves the stability of the belt, adds mag pouches, and provides better shoulder padding. Still, there are much better alternatives, and I show this mostly to illustrate how much further the next two systems have evolved. Here's a Smersh, and a Molly one at that. It's significantly better padded than the Alice belt, with an inner web belt that passes through the Molly and padding. It's also a lot more stable against the body, with 6 points of contact rather than Alice's 3, and it obviously uses standard Molly pouches. It's a big step up, but I have experienced hotspots where the inner belt pulls against the hips, and with only 3 rows of Molly, many pouches will flop around a bit when loaded. There's not much more to say about it, you've probably seen this rig a number of times in previous videos on the channel. I replaced it with this, a Crossfire DZ rig, and this is the one piece of gear I do want to talk about in depth because I consider it an exemplar of the harnessed belt rig concept. This is basically an American take on the British style of webbing, and there are a lot of things I like about this design. First, notice that there's no separate belt. The buckle and straps are sewn directly into this massive pad which evenly distributes force and prevents it from shifting or creating any hotspots. Next, the 3 sustainment pouches at the rear are also sewn directly in. I was skeptical of this at first, but they're big enough to hold canteens, propane tanks, electric speed loaders, whatever, without issue, and by being sewn in they're held rigidly to the rig. And the 4 mag pouches, 2 on each side, are attached via Molly, but as 2 large panels. It's maybe a bit disappointing that I can't remove just one pouch to replace with a kiwi or holster, but in exchange the broad mounting surface makes these pouches comparably stable to the ones on the back. You may notice that every pouch has shock cord retentions. With the rig loaded up and all the pouches tightened down, it stays exceptionally tight like a plate carrier, no matter how much weight is in it. There are a bunch more little features that reflect how well this whole design was thought out, like the choice of optional Velcro, tuck tab, and active retention. There are other modern interpretations of the harness belt kit on the market. This DZ rig is currently my favorite as it plays to the strengths of this type of gear. It holds a lot of gear, it keeps it tight and stable, and it distributes the weight evenly and comfortably. So let's look at a 2-hour rifleman setup with this rig. In the right mag pouches, I have 3 mags in one and a pair of grenades and speed loader in the other. In the left mag pouches, 3 more mags, and then a bag of BBs. The Sustainment pouches contain 2 32-ounce Nalgenes and a bottle of propane. Compared to the chest rig plus belt plus backpack setup, this involves fewer straps and more even weight distribution, spreading it across the entire torso and offloading much of it to the hips rather than concentrating stress on the shoulders. The lower center of gravity makes it more comfortable to run with, especially across broken ground. It's also fully enclosed, keeping rain and dirt out of the gear, and keeps the front clear so it's easy to low crawl with. The obvious trade-off is that this setup is more focused, omitting the sidearm and using triple mag pouches in lieu of the faster kiwis, and while I could add either, that would eat into the space available for other equipment. This is not a setup for setting speed reload records or clearing buildings. This is a setup for hiking through the woods with your buddies and occasionally getting in fights while staying cool and comfortable, keeping mud and twigs out of your equipment, and not twisting your ankle. I don't think anyone in XE prefers this sort of rig for casual skirmish days, but for longer games, several of us have similar setups. The thing that I find most interesting about the DZ rig in particular is the strap design. The shoulder straps strike a great balance, being wide and thin but still well padded, and the sternum strap can be relocated up or down as needed. This means the rig can still pair easily with the backpack or rucksack, which rests on the rear pouches and thus transfers part of the weight to the hips. Comfortably integrating with other forms of gear is a big plus and allows for similar modularity to the setup shown earlier. So to extend the previous setup to 12 to 24 hours, I can just add a backpack containing snacks, spare batteries, some basic tools, maybe the electric speed loader, and a PVS-14 for nightfall. If I need a plate carrier for armor rules, I can wear that too, adding space for a couple of mags up front in the process, or if I use ice plates for hydration, this might free up enough space in the rig to not need the backpack at all. Going the other way, if for some reason I needed more fighting gear, maybe for a grenadier loadout, I could use a chest rig to carry my mags in addition to the belt kit for general fighting equipment and the backpack for quick access and sustainment. At this point, I've basically recreated the 3-piece setup shown earlier, just replacing the 2-piece shooter's belt with the harnessed rig, though I will say the recce rig gets in the way of the straps a bit, and a slightly slimmer chest rig with 3 pouches rather than 4 would be better here. The key to stacking layers of gear is being cognizant of straps and padding. If you're going to wear a plate carrier or chest rig under a harness, it's important to minimize how thick each layer is, and ideally the lowest layer should be completely unpadded if possible. The only reason this setup of stacking padded backpack straps over padded harness straps works is because, as mentioned, the backpack rests on the rear pouches, minimizing the amount of weight borne by the shoulders. Before we wrap up, I just want to say that while I hope this video has given you some insight into the purposes and applications of different types of gear, whatever you actually use and get accustomed to will be far more effective than whatever's popular or recommended or maybe even theoretically ideal for your purposes. Experiment a bit to see what works for you. At the end of the day, this is just a game, and if everyone has a good time, that's all that matters. Let us know in the comments if there's anything here you'd like to see expanded on or specific products you'd like to know more about, and we'll see if we can address it in our upcoming Q&A. Or if you just want to support our channel, consider checking out our merch store linked in the description. And as always, thanks for watching.